And teacher pulled me out of class one day and sat me down in a little room. And there was the principal and the vice principal. And they said, Mikkel, something doesn't work quite right in your brain. And what we want to do is send you to a special school for special boys. I officially stopped going to school at 12 years old and I officially dropped out at 15. And I started traveling internationally not shortly after that. I've been traveling basically nonstop for 25 years straight. I've visited about 120 countries. I've circumnavigated the globe over 400 times. I'm not buying these to flip them. I'm buying them to create little cash machines that will produce for me and my wife and my kids forever. I've also purchased real estate 100% in Bitcoin. I helped facilitate the first transaction in the country of Panama, 100% in Bitcoin.
Mikkel Thorup joins me here today. And if you haven't heard of Mikkel, he has the Expat Money Show, but you can find all of the details at expat-money.com. Definitely check that out. He's got a long running podcast there, and the experience alone there is worth the follow. So again, it's expat-money.com. I'm going to have that as a clickable link in the show notes, but I really appreciate your time here today, Mikkel.
Pleasure's all mine. I'm looking forward to our conversation, Jack. It's going to be a fun one. And, we were chatting off air for a couple of minutes and we've got some friends in common and some similar musical tastes. And we've even got matching soundproofing walls today. So it should be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say that's been my Costco special lately. It was a bit of an upgrade because it actually helped quite a bit.
Well, I'm laughing because I thought, this was sold to me as this very high-end premium, for my brand new recording studio. And you just told me you bought it at Costco. So now I feel like a little bit silly, but no, it does work. It's nice for the upgrade for sure.
So you have an incredible reputation regarding this topic, Mikkel. And, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because I know you've probably shared this story a million times, but could you kind of give us a little breakdown of how you found yourself into this type of consultation and being a known globetrotter, for lack of a better word?
Sure. I will run through it very quickly because I think I've been interviewed on my podcast, several hundred times. I've done episodes at Expat Money Show, but I've probably been on other people's podcasts well over 200 times. So those that have heard this before, you'll have to, forgive me for the next 2 minutes. But basically what happened, Jack, is when I was a child, I was diagnosed with a learning disability. And teacher pulled me out of class one day and sat me down in a little room. And there was the principal and the vice principal. And they said, Mikkel, something doesn't work quite right in your brain. And what we want to do is send you to a special school for special boys. So that's what happened. Every day for 3 years, I got on a little white bus. I took a little white bus across town and I went to this quote unquote special school. Only problem, Jack, was that it was actually a regular school with a special class. So you can probably imagine what happened. I got in a ton of fights and I got picked on and I got bullied and it was all around a horrible experience. Now, this is no woe is me, poor Mikkel, victim type of story. Certainly not. I mean, I got hit and I hit back twice as hard if possible. But after 3 years, I got to go back to my neighborhood school and I thought all my friends and the other kids would be so excited to see me. And you can probably once again imagine what happened. Everybody started gossiping and whispering. And oh, I remember Mikkel, he went to some retard school. Thanks, guys. Very politically correct. You know how sensitive children can be. But what it did was leave a very bad taste in my mouth for public education. So I stopped going. And when I stopped going, I started failing. I officially stopped going to school at 12 years old and I officially dropped out at 15. And I started traveling internationally not shortly after that. And when I started going overseas, I started to meet all these incredible people who were learning and doing things in a completely different way that I had never seen in close to Toronto where I grew up. And I really felt like I have found my people. I found my peeps, and I started dedicating my life to exploring the world. That's what I've done for the last 25 years. I've been traveling basically nonstop for 25 years straight. I've visited about 120 countries. I've circumnavigated the globe over 400 times. I've lived in 9 different countries. My wife and I own real estate in 10, 11 countries, something like that. And actually nowadays, we kind of realize learning disability that was such a horrible thing and something doesn't work right in my brain is dyslexia. I've gone on and I've built a very successful career in something that I'm very passionate about and have a massive amount of experience on. And I'm still at 25 years after doing this, just so blessed to be alive and just so blessed to do this work. And that's led me down so many interesting paths and investment opportunities. And I'm just having a ball. I'm having so much fun doing this work. So covered a lot, but we can go in whatever direction you like there.
Well, let's go down that real estate road. You said you own real estate now in 9 different countries. Was that right? Where
Yeah, I've lived in 9. I think I guess, I mean, we could count right now, but I think it's somewhere around 10 or 11 different countries that I own real estate.
have you found any that were your favorite or more agreeable to that type of mindset?
You know what? I look at this. So I have a background in finance, in personal finance. I got very interested in personal finance probably, I guess at this point, probably 15, 16, 17 years ago. And my first investments was really in the stock market. Nowadays, I have nothing to do with the stock market. I think it's completely manipulated and you never know what's on the balance sheet. And there's so many problems there. Now I'm 100% in tangible assets. But what it did teach me was building portfolio strategy. So I try to look at real estate in a really similar manner and kind of cherry pick the best ideas from the public markets I see. So I don't have like a favorite country or favorite project or favorite jurisdiction that I like. I'm kind of adding different pieces of real estate to an overall portfolio. And I have a 8-figure portfolio myself of real estate. So we've built up with a lot of trial and error and a lot of testing on these types of things. But I'm looking for differences and things that are going to add to the portfolio. So I can kind of dig into, maybe what I'm looking for or prices or advantages when going overseas. But it's difficult to just say like, oh, this is the best, because it's so subjective.
Sure. Well, would you mind going into a little detail? And are these like more like short-term rentals, long-term rentals? What type of properties are you investing in?
So there's a million different ways to do real estate, and you have a successful real estate show. You've probably heard many ways of doing real estate. The way that I like to do it is I like doing pre-construction projects. I like to try to keep the property value, my purchase price, somewhere around the $100,000 mark. That can get me a very nice condo unit overseas or a beachfront property, single family home, things like this. And because it's pre-construction, I don't need to pay for all of it up front. I can pay it as we go. So as there are milestones on this, a typical payment structure or what I try to negotiate would be, a reservation of agreement of maybe $2,000, $2,500. Then we would go up to about 10% at contract signing. And then you would have a couple of milestones. So they break ground on it, might put down another 10%. Roof goes up, walls and roof go up another 10% with the 70% balance being paid at delivery or maybe a couple of weeks before delivery or something like this. This is a very gentle schedule of fees. Now, the majority of the projects that I've seen in my career, we're looking at somewhere around a 30 to 50% capital appreciation during the build cycle. And a build cycle for us somewhere around, 18 months to 24 months. I'd say 24 months is pretty standard, especially if it's a single family home or a small gated community. If it's well, first of all, I don't do like 60-story condo units or something like that because the biggest risk with pre-construction is they don't hit their sales numbers, they don't get enough funding, and then they can't build the building. You buy a single family home, you are the financing for it. You're the one paying for it. So there's very little risk out there. But if we're looking at something that's going to appreciate between 30 and 50%, and you're only putting 30% down, really what you're doing is you're doubling your money, at least your cash that you put into the project within 2 years or less. I'm not buying these to flip them. I'm buying them to create little cash machines that will produce for me and my wife and my kids forever. Different countries are going to cash flow at different amounts. I try to put in some short-term rentals, like maybe some beach properties. We have city properties. We've got some things in the mountains. I'm even now getting into commercial real estate, some office spaces, which, I would not touch office space in New York, with a 10-foot pole, but overseas in developing countries that are growing rapidly, office space is a very, attractive market to be in. So we kind of do, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we build it all together in that portfolio manner.
Yeah, it does. The numbers that you're throwing out are actually fairly surprising. And I think that would be the case for most people that are listening. I wouldn't have guessed that you could see that level of appreciation in such a short amount of time in some places.
Well, you have to understand that there's very little liquidity or financing in a lot of these markets. So people are not coming in with mortgages or 5% down or anything like that. They're all cash buys. So let's take a country like Paraguay. Okay. I'm super fan of Paraguay. I love it there. I've been there multiple times. I own a lot of real estate in Paraguay. I have commercial units, I have office units, I've got condos, I've got raw land, I've got a whole bunch of stuff in Paraguay. This is a massively growing country of 7 million people with a rising middle class. Average age is somewhere around 30, early 30s in there. These are people who are now getting university degrees, moving into their own homes away from their parents, getting married, things like this. A lot of them don't have cash to buy their own property, but what they can do is rent. So, you have a developer who needs to finance this. And what we really do at Expat Money is we source a lot of club deal type of things. So I have private clients that I work with, private investors, and we're not pooling our money because these are all titled properties, but we're able to, provide a certain level of assurance to the developer that he's going to hit his milestones. So I'm able to negotiate as a group, and we'll usually take the first 50% of the building. In a lot of pre-construction, 50 to 60% of the value of the building is to build the building, to acquire the land, to get the architecture, the building materials, to build it. The profits are going to come on the back end. If I can negotiate quite heavy on the front end and take the first 50% of the building, then I can get very nice prices for us. He can take the rest of the units and sell them to general public. I don't care about general public. I care about, my client base. But because he's not selling one apartment at a time at, $70,000, he's selling half the building, these prices become very attractive. And that's why we're able to get this much higher returns than in other scenarios.
When you were reviewing different parts of the world to invest in, were there any challenges or anything that would have slowed your roll a little bit regarding hiccups or things that people should be aware of?
I had a call this morning with a developer of a project that I bought in Africa, in the Gambia. It's a test project. I did it for myself. I didn't bring any clients or anything in, but I wanted to start getting my feet wet a little bit with investing in Africa. I took a call with the German, Austrian developers who are working there, European standards, very good people, very trustworthy. They had to get me on a call and say, hey, listen, we had a local partner. He started to try to squeeze us for money, and we've had to back out of that arrangement. And as such, he's making these claims in the newspaper, and he's got friends at the police office, and we're being harassed. So, I'm very careful about who I work with, and I like to test things myself. Am I going to be bringing this project out to my clients? No, I'm not. I'm okay to risk my own money, but I'm very, very particular about what I will do with one of my clients or one of the people that I work with. So, different countries, different jurisdictions, different political situations, geopolitics, local partners, extortion. Africa is not for the faint of heart. But, take a place like in Panama, where I am right now, which is a very sophisticated market and a very developed real estate market. The laws are very clear. We don't have these types of problems in a place like this. This is a very gentle market to enter into. You still need to work with professionals. You still need to know what you're doing, but there's quite a far cry between, Panama, like literally the Panama Canal is outside my window right now.
I'm curious, you mentioned you originated from Toronto. Do you own any real estate in Canada, or is that just something you wouldn't even consider?
I like being in these cash markets with more friendly governments who are very interested in having foreign direct investment and wealthy expats who are coming to their country. I'll give you a quick story. So I was in Paraguay. I'm leaving in Paraguay, any day now. And I was in Paraguay earlier this year, and I had an opportunity to sit down with the president of Paraguay. I've had an opportunity to sit down with him twice. Once here in Panama, I got invited to a special luncheon with a small group of investors. Panama's joining the Mercosur, which is like the large free trade agreement in South America. Paraguay is a member. He came over to see Molino, our president here in Panama. So I had a sit-down meeting in Paraguay, unofficial meeting, half an hour, just me and the president and one of my colleagues. And we're talking and going back and forth, and I'm advising the president on immigration and what the country should be doing to attract foreign direct investment. And he stops me and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, Mikkel, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about freedom. And I was like, yes, President, I'm talking about freedom. That's exactly it. He said, don't worry, we have lots of that here. And I was like, this place is amazing. So very pro-business, right-leaning, very open to investment, booming economy. And it's like the rest of the world hasn't caught up yet. So it's like this huge advantage that we have as independent investors before the institutional money comes in, which it is coming in, by the way. They've have a rating upgrade by Moody's in the country. So there's so many things there, but an administration and a government who wants this investment into the country and is opening pathways. I've had a chance to sit down with probably a half a dozen ministers in the country, Minister of Economy, Minister of Finance, all of these people, and actually give them feedback, and they're very open to it. There is no way I would get that in Canada. It's not possible.
The reason I asked that, we're seeing that within certain states within the United States, of course, whether it's California and New York and a few other places. I just find it almost impossible to do this type of work. But you'd think we'd start to see the political landscape seems like a big rubber band. It just snaps from one end to the other, and there's no point where we kind of settle and find any kind of agreement. Do you think Canada is ever going to return to some level of sanity, or is it just kind of a lost cause?
No, I mean, it's just completely going downhill on every level. I do not follow Canadian politics very closely. I hear most of it from my clients because my main responsibility is helping move Americans and Canadians and their wealth offshore. That's why we develop these portfolios. That's why we deal with the taxes and immigration, is people who want a new life overseas. We secure a new life abroad. I hear some of the stuff that's going on back home, and it's really crazy. I just don't understand how they think that this is acceptable behavior, how to treat human beings. And it's just so disrespectful to productive members of society who have built things and created things and served others their entire career. So I want to be in a country that respects freedom and is heading in the right direction and is growing. But I think these so-called Western democracies are just in a lot of trouble.
Well, I'm going to ask you some questions regarding what it means to be an expatriate and everything associated with it and some of the other benefits. Before we do, I want to remind everybody, check out expat-money.com. Mikkel has a big event, like your biggest annual event on October 10th and 12th. Definitely something to check out, sign up for. There's a variety of tiers. I think you even mentioned there's even a free tier at one point. And last year you meant there was 8,000 attendees. Like, this is a big event.
Correct.
So definitely something worth checking out. And if you found some value in what we're talking about so far, the show only grows if you share it with an investor friend. So consider doing that. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. This concept of being an expat is probably relatively new to the people listening to this show. Most of the people that are listening here are likely currently investing in the United States and maybe Canada. Could you talk a little bit about the benefits and why somebody would consider this as maybe a plan B?
Sure. I think Plan B is an extremely important concept that people need to understand. It used to be a little bit fringe. People at the back of the room on these investment conferences who are kind of looking at protecting the downside. I think over the last 5 years, 5.5 years, people really realize how important it is to have some assets international. This would include a bank account, really focus on productive real estate. I do a little bit of land banking, but really productive real estate. I like cash flow. So something that's going to generate an income for you overseas, and then a roof over your head. I mean, those are key components. Now, on the back end of the real estate, if we can secure you a residency or a citizenship, so this is the legal right to live, work, do business in a foreign country, then amazing. Then this is absolutely something that we should go after. So when we are choosing real estate, we're trying to be very strategic about it. We want it to be able to, tick multiple boxes. That's why I do like a lot of the short-term rentals. Pick it in a country where you would viably want to spend time. No point in doing this in a country that you hate or you don't like warm weather and you don't care for the beach. Well, then something in the Caribbean is probably not going to work very well for you, or vice versa. You want to be near the ocean, then maybe being up in the Andes or something is not going to work. If we can get a residency on the back end, then that's really, really key, because we need to protect your person. We need to protect your wealth. We need to protect your family. We need to have access to capital. So, being able to pay your bills, have a credit card. Look what happened in the trucker convoy back in Canada. They froze bank accounts for people who donated to a peaceful protest. And, there were single mothers who couldn't pay their electricity bill in the middle of winter. I have clients who got censored and shut down and their bank accounts closed during these things. For me, that's extremely abusive. And, they had no right to do these types of things under any metric, but they did it anyways. Now, if you had an offshore bank account or you had a property overseas generating income and you had the money going legally in the right accounts and everything like that, and you're filing, the power and the pressure that they can put on you are dampened a lot. I believe in personal responsibility more than anything else. And I want people to have the power and control over their own life. And that includes access to their money.
Do you have any thoughts or opinions on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies?
Very much so. I've been into Bitcoin since 2016. So I own a lot of Bitcoin. I mean, I'm not a Bitcoin specialist. It's not the biggest thing that I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, but I have owned Bitcoin for a very long time. I've also purchased real estate 100% in Bitcoin. I helped facilitate the first transaction in the country of Panama, 100% in Bitcoin. We sell a lot of real estate in Bitcoin. Probably could do some of the stable coins or maybe Ethereum, but I probably would focus on Bitcoin. I think that is the most viable project. But don't ask me to explain the white paper and all the technical aspects. My background is not as a programmer, but I do understand very much from the philosophical side of the importance of Bitcoin, and very much a fan of that as an Austrian economics proponent.
Yeah, I was just curious as to, you get the impression that it's kind of an investment vehicle or a speculation at best in the United States, but it seems like there are some smaller countries that seem to be taking it up as a standardized currency.
Correct. I mean, the notable one is El Salvador, and I know the people in El Salvador very well, and I talk to them on a regular basis on the ones who are putting Bitcoin in place there. And I think it's extremely exciting what President Bukele is doing in that country. I had the opportunity to first visit El Salvador in 2003 or 2004. So we're talking well over 20 years ago. And then I've been back since, and the transformation there is pretty amazing. It's now the safest country. I don't know about in the world, but definitely in all of the Americas, certainly safer than the US or in Canada where I grew up. Very safe country, on any type of metric that you're looking at. The direction that some countries are going in are very positive. So it kind of looks like there's very dark times in the world, and in certain regions there are, but there are also enclaves too. So I would encourage people to try to stay focused on the positive things out there. That's what we're doing. We're always looking at opportunities for people. We're looking at solutions. I'm never here to complain or whinge or, cause more problems. It's more about what are the solutions.
I would imagine that there are a lot of countries that we have like bad preconceptions about. El Salvador is likely going to be one of them. But now you said that it's turned around. Are there any other places that are in a similar situation where maybe in the United States or Canada, we kind of have a bad perception, but we should actually consider because we're just misinformed?
Well, I think Latin America, there is a big story to be told in Latin America, the transformation from the left to the right. The socialist countries in Latin America are going down. Now, there are still problems there. There is still Venezuela and, Bolivia and Peru and things like this. But we also have countries like Paraguay, which I've mentioned already, Santiago Peña, amazing. We have Raul Molino here in Panama, amazing. We have Kelly in El Salvador. We have Danielle Noboa in Ecuador, who is very pro-business, right-leaning, who is trying to turn that country around, Even, Colombia, which has one of the worst reputations in the world, or it did have, Petro, who is their president right now, is horrible, but it's pretty much guaranteed that he will be out next year. And if you look at all of the state elections, they've all gone right, and by a wide margin, like over 70%. So the socialists are just getting destroyed in a lot of these countries because they really see what's happened to neighboring countries or even their own country. The most notable is Javier Milei in Argentina, who is a self-proclaimed anarcho-capitalist, libertarian, Austrian economics. I mean, I'm very fond of what he's doing. I think he's still got so much work. I'm also a little bit disappointed that he did not get rid of the central bank like he promised he would. But Javier Milei is a very interesting one. I mean, he follows me on X now and retweets a lot of my stuff. So, they're doing some pretty interesting things in that country. You talk about Latin America 20 years ago. It was so different. But I think people have had enough. And now you see these enclaves, as I said, coming out.
Managing all these properties and doing all of these projects across the globe, you must have a pretty sizable team or some great processes or tools in place. Can you talk a little bit about the process behind scaling and what you did to manage all of this?
I started with the humble spreadsheet and did a lot of things on my own. Eventually, the wealth grew to so much that it just was not possible anymore. I've spent the last 2 years converting all of my wealth to a family office setup. We run a small family office. It's a 5-person team, including my in-house legal counsel and a couple of admin staff. I do all of the investment myself. We use quite sophisticated enterprise level software for asset tracking. I do, we could be considered a single family office, small single family office, or a hybrid family office because my operating company at expatmoney.com is around a 30-person team. So I borrow some of the expertise that are on that team to help out with the family office, like our CFO, he helps out a little bit, and, different pieces of the puzzle. Now we have, quite a sizable real estate portfolio. So we work with a lot of local partners. I, first of all, never invest in a property where there's not property management on site and property management that I trust. So I'm not really managing a lot of the properties myself. I'm not finding the tenants. The tenants, have no idea who I am. I also structure everything very securely and privately. So even if they were to find out, all they're going to find is a corporate structure. We have a structure down here in Latin America called an SA, a Sociedad Anónima, which is basically an anonymous corporation. So you can own a lot of assets through that. So your information is not in the public registry. If you're doing these types of things and you're still a tax resident back in the US or in Canada, you have a legal tax obligation to report all of your income and your assets wherever you have them in the world. I am not a Canadian tax resident. I haven't been for a very long time, and I am not a US tax person. So the rules are slightly different for me than they might be for you. There is a lot of ways, a lot of strategies we can use for structuring these things overseas. And then with the local property management, they're just remitting funds. I mean, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know who the tenant is. I'm not dealing with, tenants, termites, and toilets or any of these horror stories that we hear about. It's a line item on my investment, software on my spreadsheet.
Well, if they go to expatmoney.com, could you kind of give a brief summary? Like what kind of help does your team provide or how can they get involved in a few things?
Sure. So straight off the bat, you mentioned earlier that we have the online summit. The online summit is expatmoneysummit.com. It's October 10th to the 12th. We are expecting somewhere around 8,000 people around this year. Previous speakers were Congressman Dr. Ron Paul, my friend and mentor Doug Casey. We've had Mark Faber, certified billionaire, on there. We've had many, many very famous names you would expect. And then a whole host of names you would never know. These are the local lawyers I work with, or accountants, or property developers, or precious metal depositories, all these people who are on the ground doing this work. So that would be the first thing I would encourage you guys. and that is free to attend. So that is an excellent opportunity to learn a lot and not have to commit any money. Now, if you want a little bit more help, we do have a membership program. Basically, you get access to a ton of exclusive content. We're doing a lot of club deals. We make a lot of introductions to the people on the ground, and we have a huge Rolodex of partners that I've built up over the last 25 years of traveling. On top of that, we have a group coaching program. We do basically group coaching programs usually once every quarter. They're capped at 15 families. They are, low, let's call it low 5-figure amounts to join these types of programs. And then if you need a little bit more one-on-one, help and guidance, I do private consulting, which is actually where I started. I started on private consulting about 10 years ago, serving clients. That is a more substantial investment, but it is weekly calls with me, unlimited email follow-up. I join all the calls with the lawyer, so I'm in your corner, with the developers. I help negotiate the contracts. I read through everything. We develop the entire plan together, and I stay with you the entire time. So if you're, I would say realistically, I'd say the average client that I'm working with at that level is probably at the $10 million and up range. But even if you're a couple $1 million of investable capital, we can probably find a way to work together on these things. So you kind of have like 4 different options there. Free option, available to everybody, doesn't matter net worth, membership, flat fee, no interaction, group coaching, and then one-on-one coaching. And that is the business, and that's what we've been doing for a very long time.
And just remind everybody, you can find more details there at expatmoney.com. Definitely check out that summit. That sounds like an awesome opportunity for everybody. Before we jump into the rapid fire and close out this episode, is there anything else we should have tried to hit on here today?
No, it's been a very good conversation, and hopefully your audience are inspired and learned a couple of things. We could probably talk for the next 24 hours straight, about a lot of the details, but in such a short time, I want to make sure I try to pack as much value in for them as possible. And like I said, there's a ton of free content on our podcast, the Expat Money Show, or on our blog or webinars or anything out there. Just search for it, 10 years of stuff. So lots to go through.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to have all of those corresponding links in the show notes. But if you're ready, Mikkel will close out with the rapid fire.
Let's do it.
What lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
Wow. What lie do real estate investors usually tell themselves? I think that a lot of people have had a bad experience and then they try to tell themselves that this time it will be different. And, they work with a strategy that might work for somebody else, but doesn't work for them. And they just keep doubling down. And it's like, well, maybe that's not the right thing for you. I see that a lot.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Forgive yourself for being dyslexic and don't beat yourself up about something that was completely not in your control.
Do you have a book recommendation?
Ooh, book recommendations. I really like a book called Mindset by Carol S. Dweck. Very, very nice book, and actually really ties into what I was just saying. I was, diagnosed with a learning disability, but I was considered gifted. And it was this weird interaction between, if you're gifted, then why are you having so much trouble with reading and writing? And if I'm so gifted, then I shouldn't have to practice or study or work at it. And it's like, no, actually, with a growth mindset, everything is possible if you put the time and energy and effort into it. And once I really read that, it was like the whole world changed for me. So I encourage people to understand about the different types of mindset that you can have.
What single process or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time-saving impact?
Ooh, I mean, I'm very much a big one for different types of software. So we're quite a tech-focused company. We're very good about these types of things. I use Telegram like crazy, and the voice option of voice notes, it just saves me, once again, as a dyslexic, being able to leave voice notes for all of my team, and then the translate and the transcribe function on Telegram is insane. And my staff are in like half a dozen different countries. We all work in 3 different languages. So being able to use those type of technology all in a seamless fashion has been a massive time saver in my business.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, Mikkel. One more time, it is expatmoney.com. Definitely check out the Expat Money Show and then the Expat Money Summit coming up October 10th through the 12th. Those are all going to be clickable links in the show notes, but it was great to meet you, and I hope you'll consider coming back.
I would love to come back. Thank you very much for the conversation and an amazing work you're doing here. I really appreciate all of the important information that you are putting out on your program. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.